The next folder is the /users folder. So this folder contains one subfolder for each user that has logged on at this computer. That is referred to as the user's profile folder. Definitely something you'll be hearing me refer to a lot. Okay, so a user's profile folder exists in the /users folder. So if I go out to this computer and I go to the users folder, you can see D. Perryman, J. Rooter 44, that's me, J. Barabee 11, J. Deckers 11, and so on. So what happens when you log into a computer for the first time is it checks to see if you already have a profile folder on this, well, I just said for the first time, right? So when you log in, okay, it checks to see if you already have a profile folder on this computer. So when you go back to a computer that you've previously used and you've made changes to the desktop, you've added pictures of your kids to the desktop, you've added shortcuts to your gaming programs on the desktop, you've changed your default browser, you've changed your home page on your browser, and then you log in again and all those settings are still there. That's because they're stored in your profile folder. Okay, those settings are stored buried down deep in the bowels of this file system. Okay, when you log in for the first time, that's when that folder gets created. So I'm logging into this computer for the first time. It checks to see if I have a profile folder. It determines that I don't have one. Therefore, it creates a folder in /users. The folder name by default will match your login name. So if my login name is jrooter44, as it is, you can see that my profile folder is jrooter44. If your username is jdoe22, then your profile folder's name would be jdoe22. Are we good with that? Yes? Okay, so understand that this is when a user logs on for the first time. It has nothing to do with whether the account and a profile are two different things. If I have a user account on this computer, but I've never logged on at this computer, then I don't have a profile on this computer. Okay, so I could have a user account on this computer. Somebody could have created a user account for me, but then I never used it. Okay, the user account is not, when the user account gets created, that's not when the profile gets created. The profile gets created when the user logs on for the first time. What it actually does is it takes the contents of a folder, next on my list, the default folder. Okay, if I change the view here for a second and I display hidden files, you'll see that there's a folder here called default. Okay, this one right here. These are shortcuts. Those are not actual folders. They're shortcuts to other folders. Okay, so you can see this folder called default. So that folder is contains the starting values or the starting content of a new user's profile. So if I log into this computer for the first time as jdoe, it creates a folder called jdoe in the /users directory, and it copies the contents of the default directory into the jdoe folder. Okay? From that point on, anytime jdoe makes changes, it obviously only affects his profile. Somebody else logs in for the first time, a folder that matches the folder name that matches their login name gets created. The contents of the default folder get copied to, if we take a look at that folder, you can see that it contains things that you typically see in your personal profile folder. This is where they start from. Okay? If I added something to this folder, then any new user that logs in for the first time after that point, that would be part of their profile folder. Okay, so again, the user's profile folder is a folder that gets created when a user logs on for the first time on any Windows operating system. The first time you log in, it usually takes a little longer, and that's why. Okay, because it's actually creating that profile folder for you. How many of you actually use the computers in the labs downstairs? Take long to log in? But it's always the first time, okay? Because those computers don't save your profiles. So even if you physically sit at the same computer every time you're in a class and it's in a lab, and you physically sit at the same computer every time you log in, it creates your folder. And then when depending on what machine you're sitting at, some of them are real machines. Some of them are VDIs or virtual machines. If they're VDI or virtual machines, and when you log off, that whole VDI gets thrown back into a pool and your profile goes away. If it's a real machine, then it's kind of like this. Have I talked about deep freeze in this class? No. Okay, so this is a real machine, and some of our labs still have real machines, and these machines have a program installed on it called Deep Freeze. And Deep Freeze is a program that, the way that they work it here on campus anyway, is they install everything that you need, all the programs and everything that are needed by students on the computer. They set up the way that they want that default directory to look like, and then they freeze the machine. Okay, and they use this program called Deep Freeze. And what that does is it means that anytime somebody starts the computer, it's always going to start with the image that was frozen. If you log in and you delete files and folders from that drive, you install applications on that computer, you do all kinds of stuff on that computer, as soon as that computer is shut down, not when you log off, when it's shut down, okay, anything that you did will go away. Which is why we're able to allow you to have administrative rights on the computers when you're here on campus, because whatever you do is going to go away anyway.
Has that been around for a while?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we've had it for a really long time.
When I was a kid, I went to another college campus because a friend's mom worked there, and we would install games on the computers. And,
they would go away the next time. Yeah, they probably had something like Deep Freeze. I don't know. I'm sure there are other products that do something similar, and it may not have been Deep Freeze, but I'm sure it was something similar. Sounds like my kids when they used to come sit in the back of the room.
So you just put C /users and that file folder open, you're saying?
Yeah, you can browse to it through this PC. So if you go to this PC and you go to the C drive.
You did it from the command prompt. Can you do it that way, you're saying?
If I'm at the command prompt, well, I'm here, but if I'm at the, we'll get to how to get there from the command prompt when we get into commands. Okay, but yes, you can navigate to it from the command prompt as well. Okay, right now, my main objective is to explain the folder's purpose, okay, whether it's hidden or not, and what's contained in it. Okay, and if there's a variable that represents that particular folder. Okay, so as I already noted, your profile folder does have a variable. Okay, if I do set you can see that there's this variable called user profile, and notice that points to my personal profile folder, which I pointed out earlier. Okay, so again, that profile folder. Typically, that profile folder will include things like your documents, your music, folders that are used to store things like music, documents, downloads, and so on. Okay, so the way most of Microsoft's products work and most modern day programs work, that if you go to do file save, unless you've changed the setting within the program, if you do a file save, usually the default save location is documents, yes? Okay, if you're downloading something from the internet, usually the default save location for the downloaded file is your downloads folder. Okay, obviously you can change that. There are settings within the software that they can be changed, but if you've never changed the defaults, then these folders were created to, again, organize the types of files that are being stored within your personal profile area. By default, one user does not have rights to another user's profile. Okay, so in other words, if I browse out right now to the C drive and I go to the C:users, and I can obviously very easily navigate into my own profile folder. But if I try to get into Doris's profile folder, it tells me that I don't currently have permissions. Now, it does say click continue to permanently get access, and I do have the right to do that. I'm not going to, okay? But because I do have administrative rights on this computer, I could go that one step further and give myself access to that folder. But a regular user, okay, a user that does not have administrative rights would not have the ability to get beyond that point. Okay, so understand that there's security on folders on your Windows operating systems, and the default security on your personal user profile folder is configured such that you, the user who in essence created it, have full rights to it, and any administrative accounts that exist on this computer can gain access to it, but nobody else can. Okay, and that's the security on the folders. Okay. Questions? So I talked earlier about the C:\program data folder and that it was hidden, and I indicated that it stores non-user specific, so all users, application data that's specific for all users and not specific just for you. Your personal data, application data, is stored in a folder called, in your profile folder, called app data. And I don't believe I have hidden files displayed. I do. Oh, it's right there. I didn't see it. Okay. So there's the app data folder. Again, it is hidden by default. So if I didn't have this selected, it wouldn't show me the app data folder. There is a variable that represents that folder for me, and that variable, again, if I come out here and I do set A, you can see that there's a folder called the variable called app data that will actually bring me right into the folder called roaming. I'll talk about the 3 folders that are in there in a second. Okay, but again, if I come out here and I type %appdata%, okay, it's going to bring me right to, even if hidden files are not displayed, it'll bring me right into that folder. So I'm just going to back this up again and just kind of point out that there are 3 folders in app data. One is called local, one is called local low, and one is called roaming. Roaming contains data that would roam with a user account. So let me explain what that means. By default, your profile is stored locally on your computer. That's the default. I just explained what happens. You log in for the first time. It creates a folder by your user's name in the C:\users directory, and that's your profile folder. Okay? If I have 5 computers sitting in front of me, and I log into all 5 computers, I have 5 different profiles on all 5 of those computers, right? Yes? Okay, because a new JRuder44 folder gets created on each one of those. If I wanted to make sure, or if I wanted to make sure that no matter which of those 5 computers I logged in at, I have the same profile, okay? And that profile was stored up on a server somewhere, and no matter where I logged in at, that profile came down and was made available to me. That's called a roaming profile. We don't get into the how in this class, server administration. There are a few of you in my server administration class. Don't worry, you'll learn how to configure those in that class. Okay? But for the most part, that's what roaming means. It gives you the ability as a network administrator. You could say, I want you to have, you tend to bounce around from one computer to another. You don't have one set computer here in our company, but I want you to have a consistent interface whenever you log in. I want to make sure that you have access to, all of whatever shortcuts you've added to your system. So I want your profile to roam with you, to follow you wherever you go. Okay, that's a roaming profile. Those are the files and folders that you'd find under roaming, which are most of them. Rolling.
So app data is the folder of all your stuff, you're saying?
Yes, personal, user-specific application data. Whereas that C:\program data was the all users application-specific data. Okay, so the personal to you is in your app data folder, which is in your profile folder. So roaming contains the data that would roam with the user account from computer to computer. Local contains data that's specific to a single computer. It's never synced. Sometimes this is data that typically is very large files. Because remember, if I have a roaming profile and I have a very large roaming profile, what effect do you think that's going to have when I log in on a computer? If it's got to go up to the server and bring down files every time I log in, as opposed to just accessing them locally, it's going to prolong that logon process. So some files that are categorized as very large might be under local. Those files would not roam with you, okay? And then the local low is the same as the local folder, but it's designed for low integrity applications. For example, when you're running Internet Explorer in protected mode, for example, files that are associated with that would be stored there. But for the most part, usually, even though when you come out here, you can see it's actually the roaming folder, usually just app data is sufficient. And if somebody says, where's your personal application data stored, that hidden app data folder is a sufficient answer because it is stored within the contents of that particular folder. Okay? Questions on app data. And again, it is hidden, so if I don't have hidden files displayed, I can certainly still get there by simply typing in the variable name, but I can't browse to it if the hidden files are not displayed, okay? The next folder is called C:\users public. Okay, so the public folder, notice when I open this, there's a public documents, a public downloads, a public music, a public pictures, and a public videos. Microsoft keeps changing things. These folders the purpose of the folders hasn't changed. It's where they appear that's changed from 7 to 10. But the purpose of the folder is to provide you, the user who's physically sitting at this computer, to very easily share files with other users that are using this computer. The term public means public. Okay, so in other words, as I indicated to you a few minutes ago, if you have 3 users that are using the same computer at home, and they all have their own login, and they all have their own profile folder, that means, and if you do not have administrative rights on that computer, you cannot access somebody else's documents. Okay? But if I know that I have this document that I want to share with somebody else that is using this same computer, I can put it in public documents. If I put it in public documents, then anybody that sits at this computer has access to it. They have full access to it, so keep that in mind. In other words, they can delete it, they can modify it, they can do whatever they want to do it. But that's the intention of the public folder. Okay, it's a sharing location for all users. No network involved here, guys. Just the people that physically sit at this computer have the ability to access the files in public documents, public downloads, public music, public pictures, public videos. Okay, so that's the main intention of that particular folder, to allow users that are using the same computer to share folders with other users that are also using the same computer. What else? I already talked about default, and I think that's it. That's it for the folders. Obviously, there's way more folders on your C: drive than what I went over. But those are the folders that you definitely should be familiar with. Okay, when you're working with the Windows operating system, knowing where those folders live, knowing the purpose of those folders. As an IT person, obviously, is something that you should definitely be familiar with. Okay, one last thing before we call it a day, and